Welcome back to Your World. We continue taking reaction on the budget speech, and we are now joined in studio by Cosatu spokesperson Sizwe Pamla and Daniel McLaren, a senior researcher from the Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute. Welcome to you both, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Daniel, we were chatting before coming on air. You're not happy with what Minister Gordhan has dished out in the budget speech. Tell us why.
Look, I think that it's been widely acknowledged that it's a difficult speech that the minister had to make, and not only because of the economic conditions, but also the political machinations of various kinds that are revolving around him at the moment. But nevertheless, with every budget there is opportunities in terms of how we raise funds, how we distribute those funds. And while I think there's definitely a fair amount to welcome in the budget, we have made our tax system, for example, more progressive, which is an important move by increasing the top rates on very wealthy earners. I think the ideas that were suggested around reforming municipal finance also to be welcomed, and probably drawing on the minister's experience at COGTA before coming back to Treasury. And if those can be implemented, that of course will make a huge impact to service delivery. But in other areas, I think, in terms of making sure that there's enough resources available to push the transformative agenda that our Constitution gives us and that our President, at least rhetorically, recommitted us to. We've seen very minimal increases to education, for example, less than was expected. Social grants have barely kept up with inflation, which is really going to keep budgets squeezed for people who rely on those for their food and other expenditures. And in terms of work, in terms of jobs, very little that gives us hope that, the massive unemployment is going to be solved anytime soon. Yeah. So
basically, Sizwe, you come in as well, because we saw Cosatu's reaction. You said before we went to an air the fact that it was kind of expected for you guys as Cosatu. Just go into a little bit of why you expected it, and apart from the economy being the way that it is currently in South Africa.
Well, because we've been here before. As Cosatu, we made it very clear when we released our expectation statement that when you talk about radical economic transformation, it means you shift the fundamentals, you do away with the tradition. But because we know Treasury, and we've been saying this for quite some time, that this current national treasury, meaning the institution itself, has overplayed the neoliberal policies for the last 23 years. They don't seem to have a plan as to how to move out of this framework they are in. Look at the fact that they said very little about jobs. The mining sector has been hemorrhaging jobs at an alarming rate. The poultry industry, it has been decimated. And you look at all the other sectors of the economy that are struggling. We don't have a plan. We don't know what they plan to do. Look at the SOEs themselves. These are the tools that they have at their disposal to actually intervene in the economy, to give us a sense that they know how to utilize them. They actually said to us before that, well, at least the SONA, that is what the SONA said we will use the budget to dismantle the monopolies and the cartels that are dominating this economy. We've been trying to look at what exactly were they talking about, because they couldn't even increase corporate tax. Yet you have these cartels who are actually continuing to invest outside of this country. That is what is said about this. You look at the measures that are currently taking place. Most of these big companies are actually investing outside of the country. But government is fearful. That's the problem that we have. We have a fearful government that does not have a backbone. From where we are as workers, if you are an unemployed person, a young person who's sitting there, and you are watching your dreams pass you by, and you are hoping that the speech was going to deliver for you, of course, you will expect that that person is disappointed.
Daniel, I see you nodding there.
Nodding, but I think it's also important to raise one other thing, which is that probably the most crucial factor that we need to start uniting around radical economic and social policies, or at least a minimum requirement, is that our government is united, that our cabinet is united, that our finance minister has the support of the president. These things mean that we could be debating the ideas which are going to bring us towards socioeconomic transformation, rather than debating who's going to be in what position next. I think that's really important to say, just because as far as budget speeches have gone in the democratic era, this is not the least progressive that we've seen. There are some progressive moves. But if we want to see a Minister of Finance who is empowered to take radical decisions, who is able to start implementing some of the things that Sizwe mentioned around corporate tax, taking on tax evasion in a serious way, regulating. I mean, there were mentions of things like a market conduct regulator, which is quite an exciting development. Then that person needs to not be being chased all the time, because when you're chased, you take a safe space, you go for a safe bet. When there's turmoil all around you, you tend to go for stability. But of course, stability in South Africa means a continuation of largely the status quo.
Now, let's speak about Minister Gordhan's speech, the fact that he did mention that, for instance, there will be an increase in taxation for the wealthy, which is anyone who earns 1.5 million upwards, to work towards increasing the budget in terms of what the country requires in its coffers, to ensure that that money is filtered through to everything that he spoke about. He spoke about education, which, as you mentioned earlier, you say it's very minimal to what was expected. But is it not a step in the right direction?
Well, it is a step in the right direction. We welcome that. But at the end of the day, if you are going to transform the economy, you are not going to transform the economy by just taxing a base that is already shrinking. So we are talking about here bringing in the 9.2 million people who are on the periphery into the mainstream economy. You are not going to bring those people by taxing the shrinking base more. What Cosatu has been proposing is that we need the state to start to participate in the economy. If you have a car that is stalled and you are not prepared to push that car, you are waiting for a miracle. You have to be hands-on. What government is currently doing is hoping for the best. This tinkering with the system is not going to deliver the results. For an example, we are very happy with the noises, including what the Treasury has said about land reform. We think that is very crucial. But the question is, what do you expect those people to do with that land if you don't have a state financial institution? Where are they going to get access to easy access to funding from? Because if you look at the commercial banks, they are not necessarily welcoming for small businesses. They are struggling. You look at the administered prices, electricity cost, transport cost. These small businesses that we keep talking about are not going to really go anywhere, because unless you have a developmental state, which means a state that is deliberately saying we are moving from replacing white capitalists with black capitalists, because that is what worries us as workers. We listen to what the minister has been saying. He's talking about black economic empowerment. For us, black economic empowerment is a narrow definition of radical economic transformation. This is about bringing in the unemployed, the 17 million people on welfare. They have to get a sense that they are part of this economy. The workers who are at the bottom end of the economic pyramid, you look at 47% of people who take home 3,300 rands. How do you ensure that those people feel that they are part of this economy? You can't replace black capitalists with white capitalists. What Cosatu wants to see is strategic nationalization, like we have said previously. Is government starting to say, we are going to participate in this economy. We do need that state bank. We are not going to transform anything without really having ensured that we have a state financial institution that will help not just big business, but help everyone to feel that they are part of this economy. But
we do have the Small Business Development Ministry, which Minister Lindiwe Zulu is the caretaker of. And in terms of that, and giving land back to black people, as you put it, that agency or that ministry is there for that particular reason, to ensure that it empowers black people to understand when they take over the land, working in agriculture.
Actually, having the Department of Small Business Enterprises, the Economic Development Department, and then you look at the Department of Trade and Industry, it gives you a sense that the economic policies of this government are not coherent enough, because these people have to be working together to make sure that we actually are clear as to what is it that we are trying to do. South Africa's economic framework on the new growth path, in the industrial, the EPAP, all of them are centered on creating jobs in the manufacturing sector, job-intensive sectors. But we didn't hear anything. Look at the 9 billion that was given to the Department of Trade and Industry. How are you going to industrialize the country with such a minimal amount of money that is being allocated? The fact of the matter is that we have failed following these very same principles and policies for the last 23 years. And to hope that because now for some reason a miracle will happen, we are not convinced as workers. What we want to see is government that is going to acknowledge that the last 23 years have been a disaster, and now we need to change the fundamentals of the economy. Radical talks about changing the fundamentals, not the incremental and an almost piecemeal approach to economic transformation.
Now, Daniel, let's bring you in here, where we saw the minister increasing amounts of the social grant, disability, and so on, by minimal amounts, but which will make a difference to the poverty-stricken, the people who are dependent on government and the system to assist them with their livelihoods. Bearing that in mind, there was a report that was issued to the minister with regards to human rights. Can you just take us through that very quickly?
Sure. So a group of civil society organizations from around the country, more than a dozen in total, all of whom are working on various issues in relation to socioeconomic rights in particular, so women's rights, children's rights, healthcare rights, etc. We got together this year as part of quite a strong tradition in South Africa. Cosatu has also been involved in the past of producing a people's budget speech or an alternative budget speech. And this year we produced a human rights budget speech, which was launched at the Human Rights Commission. And this was really, people were asked around the country, if the budget were to be based solely on fulfilling human rights, on fulfilling socioeconomic rights, what would it look like? What would the health sections look like, the education sections, etc., etc. And that's allowed us to compare what we've actually seen and what was there. So in relation to social security, as you say, one of the proposals that was made in the human rights budget speech, which is available on our website, was that the child support grant, which is distributed now to around 12 million people, its value must not be just an arbitrary amount. At the moment it's 360, it's being increased to 380. It should be at least linked to some indication of what that can buy. So what we recommended was that should be linked at least to the food poverty line, which is set by Statistics South Africa, and that's set at 470 rands. So when you compare what is the absolute minimum, and the food poverty line is not something that allows you to go out to dinner every night. It's something that literally allows you to get enough maize in your cupboard to be able to cook for a month. If we were to use those kinds of indicators, those kind of poverty indicators, that would allow us to set these amounts in such a way that we could actually say that we're actually lifting people out of poverty, not just alleviating the desperate circumstances that they find themselves in. So a 20 rand increase, it's actually just below predicted inflation, which actually means that people who rely on social grants have less in their pockets next month as a result of inflation than they did last month.
Should we not be trying to get away from creating a country or an environment where people are dependent on government or welfare?
Yes, we should. And like we have said, the question is, how do we ensure that those people feel that they are part of the economy? When it comes to economic ownership, a people-centered and a people-driven economy, what you need to do is to say, here we are as a nation. We have got 17 million people on welfare. We have 47% of the workforce, part of the working poor. 60% of those people take home less than 5,500 a month. The question is, let's talk about economic ownership, not jobs, not salaries. The answer is that we have voted for a state. We've given the state a mandate, and the mandate is clear: act on our behalf. So that is what Cosatu is arguing for, is to say, when we have a government that has been voted for by the people and is given a mandate, that government has to start to act on behalf of the poor by nationalizing the strategic sectors of the economy, by actively participating in the economy. The issue here is that people are running away from the simple fact that you are not going to bring all of those unemployed people and communities to the mainstream economy unless the state acts on their behalf. That's the issue here.
Daniel, in closing?
Yeah, I think I'll just reverse your question and ask which of us is not dependent on the state. all of us. Every single business is dependent on the state for the infrastructure that it relies upon, the university graduates that it relies upon. And second of all, we have structural unemployment of about 35%, which has been the case for years, for decades. And we are a market economy largely. Now, if people are not finding work and they don't have enough money in their pockets to buy food, people go hungry. And that's why we have 12 million people in South Africa who do go hungry on a regular basis. So without social grants, I think you're really not only denying people their right to social security, but you're really risking worsening the situation. Of course, in the longer run, we want to get people working and skilled and fully included in the economy. But in the short run, our constitution requires us to eliminate need that we see around the country, and social grants are a very important victory for people actually who've been dispossessed in the past, but who now at least have something in their pockets to help them try and lift themselves out of poverty.
Gentlemen, unfortunately we have run out of time. We would have liked to have more time, but that's the way that it is. We'll have to leave it there for now. That was Cosatu spokesperson Sizwe Pamla and Daniel McLaren, a senior researcher from the Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute.